Hey guys, this is Bart coming to you from TST Industries in Florida with another track review video. In this episode, we took the GSX-8S to a local track here up in Georgia. Rolling Road Raceway is a 2-point-something-mile long track, long straightaway, and a bunch of twisties. So it is very similar to, say, canyon riding or Tail of the Dragon or spirited twisties riding. I think some of you guys that do this style of riding will find this video and this review very helpful. All right, I'm gonna try to keep this as organized as possible. We're gonna go through all of the parameters in sort of chapters. I'll tell you what I found, I'll tell you what the limitations I think were, and what we're gonna do about it to correct those. All right, let's go down the list of what we're gonna be talking about. We have ergonomics, ground clearance, then we're gonna get into suspension, chassis, and geometry. Then we'll talk about brakes, power delivery, transmission, and finally tires. And then maybe I'll just go into my final thoughts on what I thought about the bike on the street and also on track. All right, so the first thing you feel as soon as you throw your leg over a motorcycle, whether you're at standstill or riding, is how the ergonomics were developed and how they affect you. Everybody's gonna feel something a little bit different. So first, let's talk about me. I'm 185 pounds, 6 feet tall, 0 inches. What I feel on this bike is that it's very well developed for street riding, commuting, and slight spirited riding, where the leg angle here keeps the knee at roughly 90 degrees, maybe a little bit more scrunched, but that makes it very comfortable for long rides. The seat is very cushy and it's pretty low in here in the cockpit. The support of the tank is pretty well developed. You have cut-ins here for your legs and knees up here. The bar position for my height is actually very comfortable. It could be a little bit more forward. I could actually accommodate that with rotating it forward a little bit. No big deal. I didn't feel much of the need for that. The controls are very accessible. All the buttons of the electronic controls are also within reach of hands right on the bars. Levers, we've already changed the levers from the stockers. I typically don't like the stock levers. They just don't jive with my giant mitts. So we've gone ahead and changed them to the Womit Tech shorty levers that we offer here at TST Industries. They are adjustable. They do offer a little bit better feel for myself. If you guys like that sort of upgrade, check out tstindustries.com. We do have them. The rear sets here, everything is positioned well enough so that in standard riding modes, you feel good, you feel comfortable. Now you take this to the track and you start hauling butt, you start picking up the pace, and you'll notice, first thing you'll notice is ground clearance or lack thereof. Now, there are feelers here, but if you notice how short they are, you know that this is already pretty close to the ground. So, stuffing myself into corners, especially turn one, after the long straightaway, you're trying to get in there with a good amount of speed, and boot touches the ground right away. So, I had to readjust myself and get like really on my tippy toes. Beyond where I usually ride, I usually like to have the peg like right under the ball of my foot. I had to be on extra tippy toes to get myself ground clearance for my toes. Now I ran out of that ground clearance yet again in the tighter turns, and that was just an indicator that that will be my limiting factor for the day. So I wasn't able to pick up pace beyond that. Ground clearance was really the first thing that really limited my experience with going faster and checking out any parameters that could be checked out when you do go faster. So we will remedy that. Alex, one of our engineers here, is already on the case. He's creating riser plates that we will be testing, and if they pass our test and we like what they do, we'll provide them on tstindustries.com. Now, I like to talk about suspension, chassis, and the geometry setup all in one here. Mainly because I did not get to the pace where I could break down each individual system separately. So let's start with chassis. At the speed I was going, there was nothing notable to report. I think once I go faster, I'll be able to feel how the chassis performs. It does feel very rigid, but we're not going so fast that we need the extra flex in the chassis just yet. So the extra rigidity just makes it a point and shoot kind of a bike. It does respond to input really well. It responds to that input and gives you feedback. You know what you're doing. If you over demand something a little bit with an input, it lets you know that you need to ease up for the next turn. So that feels really nice on this motorcycle. But again, we will have to develop it for slightly faster riding so I can report more conclusive and extensive report to you guys. Now, geometry on this bike is very, 2020 plus naked bike type. It is meant to be peppy with upright riding. You start leaning forward, moving your center of mass forward, and it feels like it could have just a little bit too much trail in the front, and there's not much we can do about that without changing the triples. But again, once I start going faster, I'll see maybe I'll be able to accommodate better inputs with my body position being a little bit better, scooted back here with my feet in a slightly different position. More of that to come in the next video. Suspension, I didn't really put it through its paces. I didn't go through all the stroke here in the suspension, so that will have to be assessed again when we go faster. However, I do have to say this bike is very plush. It's plush, but it does give feedback. So on the brakes, it doesn't dive as much as some other bikes that I've ridden recently. It sets the suspension into the corner and you're able to keep steering through that stroke. It feels very nice. It's very well developed for what this bike is meant for. On the track, I have not exceeded what I was expecting from the suspension, so that's a very big plus. On some bikes, we'll take them to the track in stock form, and man, they're just noodle, and it's very difficult to ride well and ride fast. So take it or leave it. This thing is a very good contender within the space that it's made for. On the track, it probably will need a little bit help in the suspension department, so we will work that out when we get deeper and deeper into this project. Now we're going to move on to the brakes. Front brakes feel very nice on this bike. They are coupled through an ABS pump. However, I did not feel the mush I typically feel from ABS equipped bikes. Typically they have a very long run of fluid through tubes and rubber hoses. This may be because I wasn't demanding too much out of these brakes, or they're just really well built. I don't know what the real cause of that was, but they felt great. Roebling is not a big braking track. I did not go very, very fast, but even at that pace, I know typically I demand a set amount from the brakes, and at that pace, these brakes felt great. They grabbed when I wanted to. They were very predictable. They didn't stab. I was able to set my front suspension into corners. Very nice. Good job, Suzuki. Twin rotor, twin caliper, very nice feel. The rear brake, I didn't use all that much. On the track, I don't find the need to use the rear brake unless I'm going fast and there's something going mid-corner and I know the bike. That's when I'll start using the rear brake. So not much of a test here. I think that was covered by Mark in our street review. So if you want to check that out, we do have that available on our YouTube channel. We are going to move on to power delivery now. Power on this bike is silky smooth. It is very, very torquey. I think much of that is caused by the long plenum. The air track inside the airbox is so long. I think it was set up for acoustic response at lower RPMs, and it really shows. You whack it open, it feels like an electric bike. It's like insta torque. Up top, I can't say that it's, it's not that great. It is a 776cc motor. There's only so much you could get out of that, especially if it's set up for low-end torque. It's still, I think I reached like 135 miles an hour indicated. There is some error to that, obviously, but there's nothing to hide behind on this bike. At 135, I was just like holding on for dear life, I was trying to get deep here in the cockpit. I did get a little bit of shielding here behind the instrument and the steering, but still, there's really nothing to break that airflow. So 135 miles an hour does not feel good on this bike. However, the bike will reach that speed. It can go even faster, I bet. The straightaway at Roebling is just so long that that's what was permitted with me riding that day at that pace. Now, if I stuff myself into the last corner faster and I'm able to get out of there faster, I bet I could reach 140 on this thing. I think we would have to probably gear it a little bit shorter. I was not really, like 6th gear was not really necessary on this particular track. I think if we shortened up the gearing a little bit, maybe went 2-3 teeth up in the rear, I'd be able to take advantage of the gears in a slightly different envelope of use, and then I think I could get this thing to 140, but it probably wouldn't be sustainable. It's just very buffety at that speed. I think the most notable thing about power delivery on this bike is the off apex, out of the corner acceleration. It's not just very positive and thrillingly torquey, it's also very smooth in application. It feels like you could almost just really roll onto it and the bike just, it just takes it. I think part of that is caused by the rear suspension, the way it's tuned right now. It wasn't really doing any movement, it was just set and go. It's a very well balanced machine. I really like riding this thing. I just need to be able to ride a little bit faster to get a bigger smile on my face. We'll work that out. Let's talk about one of my favorite components on this bike, and that's the transmission. Maybe not just the mechanical components of the transmission, but also how the transmission is shifted. Now we have up and down quick shifting on this bike. It does auto blip. That comes standard from the factory. And I have to say, that is one of those components that I've used on higher end bikes with high-end electronics, and now that technology has trickled down to this type of bike. Now the MT-07 does not have that. Some of the Hondas in this sector, Kawasaki's, do not have that by default from the factory. This is a very nice upgrade right from the factory. This is not even an option. That's what you get with a standard bike. So I'm really thrilled about that. The way it's tuned, it's very buttery smooth. Up, down, the blipping, it almost makes you feel like you're making the selection of the gear, but everything else is just fully automatic. There's no upset to the chassis or anything. You just cruise it. Even mid-corner, I was able to shift up and down mid-corner just to test it, and it felt pretty good. If I was on positive throttle, it felt really good. Downshifting, you know, you have to come off, but still very, very smooth, and you almost don't notice that it's happening other than you know there's a different noise level coming from the engine. The shifter linkage is coupled into the transmission through a very large diameter rod that has been reduced in diameter to actually take the linkage, but I think Suzuki did this for the purpose of preventing torsional twisting and bowing of the rod. As you kick the gear selector into the next gear, you want that shift to be very positive. You want it to just go, boom, I'm in the next gear. And that's exactly what this bike does. I think that, coupled with the awesome electronics and whatever Suzuki did in this gearbox, really feels great. I love this transmission. Between the engine power delivery and the transmission, the power plant and the drivetrain is very, very nice. It feels great, smooth, and it gives you control. You want control when you're riding a bike, especially when you're spirited riding. This bike does feel great in that regard. Now, let's go on to tires. Whatever these tires are, they held just fine for me. I did end up going to the edge of the tire. Here we have a Sport Max from Dunlop. They are Road Sport 2. They are not race tires. I typically run race tires on the track, but I knew I wasn't going to be hauling butt, so why not just test out what it came with? I did not have a single issue at the pace I was going at. Now, I was getting to the limit of my ground clearance, so I can't really go faster beyond that, and these tires held in every area at every speed that I stuffed myself into corners. So I would say right from the box, these are good to go. So I was very pleased with the tires. their performance held for me. Just like the rest of the systems on this bike, the performance of the tire is well matched to the rest of the performance of the subsystems. My final thoughts here are, this is a very solid machine for street riding. Now for track riding and very spirited canyon and twisty riding, I think there's gonna have to be a little bit of an upgrading trend here with the ground clearance, ergonomics, couple different things. We will work out some of those components because we want to go faster on this bike. So you'll see some of those trickle down in subsequent videos that we'll be launching, and those parts will be available at tstindustries.com. For now, we already offer frame sliders, some controls, signals, fender eliminator. We are working on a taillight currently. There's no news on when that will be available, or maybe get onto our social media. We're always active there, and we always post releases there as well. Thank you for watching. Hit like and subscribe. Hopefully you'll drop me a comment. I like to hear from you. Let me know what you think about this bike here. Obviously, I'm very excited, but I want to hear what you guys think.